Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Alan Silva. I am Executive Vice President and Provost of Marian University. On behalf of our Marian community, we are honored this evening to welcome all of you to celebrate the friendship between Marian University and the Miami nation of Indiana. Marian is a Catholic Franciscan university founded in Oldenburg, Indiana by the Sisters of St. Francis of Oldenburg in 1851. We educate students in the Franciscan values of dignity of the individual, peace and justice, reconciliation, and responsible stewardship. Marian celebrates the diversity of its community and all the communities with whom we partner. It is in this spirit that we welcome the Miami nation of Indiana to our campus, most especially Chief Brian Buchanan, Special Projects Coordinator Keith Layman, the Tribal Council members, and the talented Miami drummers and dancers who will share songs with us. We cannot thank the tribe enough for your kindness to our students, our faculty, our staff, for your generosity as we learn from and alongside you, and for your openness to partnering with Marian University to create a more just and knowledgeable society. We look forward to our friendship growing in the months and years to come, and are excited for new opportunities and connections as they arise. Newe, for all that you do and are. As a quick note to our audience this evening, you're about to learn a great deal about past, present, and future Indiana-Miami culture and advocacy. At different points in the presentation, you may receive a request from Chief Buchanan or Mr. Layman to avoid photographing and filming. Please respect those wishes when they come and turn your cameras off until the song or the prayer has finished. And now, please join me in welcoming Chief Brian Buchanan, Keith Layman, and the Indiana-Miami to Marian University.
Aya tapaki ni Ilani, ni Layman Lakoke. And you're supposed to say Aya tapaki ni Ilani. Aya tapaki ni Ilani. Layman Lakoke means family. Nika means friends. So it's good to have you here. We're going to start off with two songs today, and the songs being the Crane song, then follow in with the Missinawa song. The Missinawa song speaks about the love of the family and our tribe and our people. Take it away, guys. you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We really do appreciate you guys coming out down here to Indy for this great celebration today. And drummers, guys, you guys are awesome as always. This is the Miami Nation coming out story. This thing has been passed down from generation to generation for 100 years, hundreds and hundreds of years. So I'm going to do a line in Miami. Keith will follow up a line in English so you know what we're talking about. This is what we believe, where we came from back in the day. Okay. E honji kandoki piawachi miamyaki.
Where the Miamis first came from.
Matami miamyaki nipangonje sakachawecheke.
At first, the Miami came out of the water.
E honji sakachawewachi sakaweungi itamengi.
The place they emerged is called Coming Out Place.
Nipangonjo. Newe also cheki muki cheki.
The first ones came to the top of the water.
Pimiantana ka sakakwilo elite cheki.
Grab a hold of tree limbs, they told each other.
Nehe sakachawecheki nuga. Niaha amenote cheki.
And they came out, then they formed a town there.
Niaje machake kachake. Menoteni natankangeke.
From there they went away, they left the town.
Kaputwe go te apayata.
After a while, one returned.
Apapuyate katakeke. Metosenyaki newa cheki sakaweungi.
When he came back, he saw the other Indians at Coming Out Place.
Napa sa napa ila tawa cheki ila tawa yongi.
To our surprise, they spoke just like us.
Nianje masakacheki. Menoteni natakandikeki.
From there they went away, they left the town.
Kaputwe go te apayata.
After a while, one returned.
Apapuyate katakeki. Metosenyaki newa cheki sakaweungi.
When he came back, he saw the other Indians at Coming Out Place.
Napa sa napa ilatewa cheki ilatewa yongi.
To our surprise, they spoke just like us.
Esa wendawachi metosekana ilacheki inya metosenyaki.
He named them Old Moccasins. That's what he called those Indians.
Muji ninge kila masu wenji nakosaweachi.
I don't know which tribe they belong to.
Muji weyaka kekela mewata ihe iawachi.
Nobody knew where they went.
Unini ninga kike isa mawachi ninja sakakweta masale wapangikwa.
This is how my mother's told me. My mother takes hold and her older sister, Swan Woman.
Cheki metosenyaki kosiaki ilamateka kike.
All the old Indian men believed it.
Yehonchi kandoki piawachi yamyaki.
This is where the Miamis first came from. On behalf of the Miami Nation, I want to thank you all for listening, coming to see us tonight, especially you, Marian University, for our growing friendship. I'm going to spend just a little bit on time and history because I could keep you here for hours, and I'm sure you don't want that. But on top of that, there's enough to be a several semester class, which with maybe Marian's help, that'll become a reality before long. So we believe the coming out place is at the mouth of the St. Joe River in southern Michigan, near, if you can see on the map there, near present-day Benton Harbor in St. Joe, Michigan, St. Joseph's, Michigan. Our first recorded contact with Europeans, which was the French, was 1642 in present-day Green Bay, the south part of Green Bay, Wisconsin, on the Fox River. We were up that way. Indiana has always been our homeland. Indiana, parts of southern Michigan, a little bit of western Ohio, a little bit of eastern Illinois. We had been pushed that way by the Iroquois tribes out of New York, all basically looking for control of the fur trade. And then eventually, through what's called the Beaver Wars, we and other, what they call Algonquin tribes in around the Great Lakes, Michigan, Indiana, pushed the Iroquois back to a truce, to where we were able to eventually, with the French's help, start to move back into our present-day homelands of Indiana. So I wanted to show you this. This is Kikianga. You know, a lot of times when I've studied a lot of history, or if you see Hollywood movies, you think, you know, Native Americans were just running wild, hunting things, and just scattered about the woods when frontier people got here. But Kikianga was, for all intents and purposes, it was a town. I tend not to use the word village because that tends to connotate something small, but this was truly a town. And as you can see here, it was a very large town on the headwaters of the Maumee River, which is in present-day Fort Wayne, Indiana, right in the heart of downtown Fort Wayne, actually. But what I wanted to show, this is about 1790 when General Josiah Harmer arrived, which we'll get into that here in a moment. But as you can see, it was much more than just a bunch of, as they said, savages or wild people. We had an actual village, a structure, a society. Traders lived there. We had stores. As you can see, if you look at the map, there's cornfields. So that thought of we had to be taught how to farm was really a misnomer. It was more of the Anglo want to make us take up properties of our own individually and farm. But we already clearly knew how. If you look at the map, there's cornfields all around. In fact, the Miami were known for a special kind of white corn that we grew. So as you can see, you know, we were civilized when Europeans came along. The first the three things I want to share with you tonight is a little bit of a defense of our homeland. Again, sometimes when you look at history, it's, well, Europeans came and then Americans came and they sort of defeated Indians relatively easily, pushed off the lands, and off we went. And that's really not the case, especially with us, the Miami. So the first real attack that we know of was from what would be the colonies at that point during the Revolutionary War. Auguste Le Bon was a French officer in the American Revolution, and he was motivated by George Rogers Clark, who had captured, if you're familiar with Fort Sackville, which is present-day Vincennes, Indiana. He captured that the year before in 1789 from the British. And so part of Le Bon's desire, I think, was a little bit of personal fame to follow up a victory like that and sort of one-up it by taking Detroit from the British. And so that was really his goal as he came moving through what is today Indiana, heading towards Detroit. So on October of 1789, Le Bon and his troops arrive and find that the men are out hunting. So I guess you could say he captures the town, but really more of an occupation. And then he stayed here for 2 weeks and began to take our stores, the stores that the British had kept at Kikianga, and really kind of live off of those. After that during that 2 weeks time, he learned of Chief Little Turtle's village up on the Eel River, which I've got another map coming up here. Up towards, if you're familiar with Fort Wayne and that geography, it's on the Eel River up towards what's now present-day Cherubusco, Indiana, which is a little town kind of northwest. But discovered that he had that in an actual trading post. So he had also heard, he started to get intelligence that hunting party was starting to come back. So in my estimation of really underestimating that hunting party, he left 20 men in Kikianga and headed towards Little Turtle's village and trading post on the Eel River. So then, of course, the chief returns with the hunting party, discovers Le Bon's 20 men, and pretty easily retakes, killing all 20 men, retakes Kikianga, and sets off after Le Bon and finds him on November 5th. near the banks of the Eel River now, close to, again, where his village was, which is that Cherubusco or Columbia City area, up that way. It was pretty much a rout. LeBaum's men tried to sort of dig in on the banks of the Eel River, but were quickly overrun. And all were killed, including LeBaum, except for about 2 or 3 officers that were then released back to the French as sort of a warning. And part of why this is significant is, number one, it began to spread Little Turtle's name outside of the Miami as someone who had some military prowess, a fighter. But also, it helped shift Miami views of the Revolutionary War. So those Miami that were neutral within the tribe now shifted towards the British, because to us this obviously was an attack by the American colonies at this point to try and retake our land. I also want to point out something Chief Buchanan will talk about, but I put this plaque up here on purpose. One of the challenges we face, like I said, Chief Buchanan will discuss later, is our histories are still portrayed very one-sided. So this is the plaque that's up there since the 1930s from the DAR, and I commend them on what they're trying to do, was mark that spot as a historic spot, but as you can see, it's very one-sided, where it says that LeBaum and his soldiers were killed in battle with the Miami. It doesn't really talk about, from our viewpoint, that was definitely a successful defense of our homeland. I mean, you had a military force come in and take our houses, take our land, try and take what they could. So then it's really relatively quiet. You know, we have the Revolutionary War going on out east, so there's not a lot of focus past the Alleghenies and much in the Indiana area at that time, until about 1790, about 10 years later. The revolution is now over. We've won, but as a government, we're deep in debt, so we need land, we want land, we need to sell land, so there's that problem, so to speak, if you're the new first president, George Washington, that you have to deal with. The other is the Royal Proclamation by the British of 1763 obviously doesn't apply, so you have people pouring over the Alleghenies wanting to stake their claims to lands that are still Native American in Ohio and that. So the Washington administration, I've always viewed it as sort of his first foreign policy, because this area was not part of the United States at that time, decides that Kikianga is the stronghold, so he's going to send troops to basically take Kikianga, take the main sort of power where all of our native other tribes have gathered together. So he sends Harmer to retake this area. Once he got near, his unit or his army, I guess you could say, got near present-day Kikianga, which, by the way, again, is Fort Wayne. If you're familiar, it's downtown Fort Wayne on the banks of the Maumee. It's what we call the Lakeside neighborhood today. So, but once he got on October 15th, when he got near, he sent out Colonel John Hardin to scout the area, who came into Kikianga and discovered it had been emptied and the forces in the area weren't there. We had abandoned it and also burned it. So clearly we knew they were coming. And so the next few days, Hardin was sent out on scouting patrols to try and find the Native Americans. And on October 19th, he did find right here, which is, again, if you're familiar with that geography, it's right off of US 33 in a place called Carroll Road. Today we call it Heller's Corner, is where, right on the banks of the Eel River, is where he encountered Miami. So Hardin had 180 militia and then 30 US Army regulars. So you have to remember, at this time, we don't have as a nation, we don't have a big army. So we rely a lot on militia. The Articles of Confederation, because the Constitution isn't signed yet, or is just recently signed, doesn't give a lot of power for a standing army. So a lot of times militia is used instead. And in this case, I believe it was a lot of Kentucky militia. So what Little Turtle did was he sent out a decoy, and they fell for it. They chased this scout into kind of a marshy meadow right there on the banks of the river. And when the militia got into the meadow, they discovered burning fires and trinkets and things laid around as if it was an abandoned camp. So they instantly began to plunder instead of being on the lookout. So as they gathered around it to plunder, Little Turtle had part of his forces hiding in the right side on the woods, and they opened fire into the militia, driving them over to the left. And when the militia backed up and fled to the left side of the meadow, they were fired at point blank range. That basically sent them all into a full retreat. So as they fled the meadow, Captain Armstrong and the 30 regular U.S. Army soldiers formed a line got one shot off and then were completely overrun by the Miami. What's kind of interesting about that is Armstrong actually survived by hiding in the swamp itself. The stories I've read is he literally was in the mud up to about here, so he couldn't be seen within the reeds in the mud. And then there's also an ensign named Hartshorn who hid under a log all night. So that's how we have some good description, if you will, is because we had 2 survivors that were hiding there all night at the site of the battle. Then the militia reformed into a line and we stopped pressing the attack. But just in that first little encounter, of the 180 militia, we killed 40 and wounded 52. So almost a third of his attacking force was taken out through strategy. That's why I wanted to point these out. It wasn't just dumb luck. It wasn't just rage or aggression. There was actually thought processes to little turtle strategies and things. So then General Harmer, who had been sitting at Kikianga when all this happened, decided to withdraw. And they fell back about 8 miles to the south side of Fort Wayne today, where they had camped on the 15th as they came into town. But he begins to get reports that about 120 Native Americans have moved back into Kikianga. So he decides that he wants revenge for Hardin's defeat 2 days from before. So he decides to attack Kikianga once more. So around dawn on the 22nd of October, a force of basically 400 militia, 600 regulars, and even 400 cavalry are sent once again under Hardin's direction to retake or to capture or attack Kikianga. So they're divided into 4 detachments, one under Hardin, one under a gentleman named Major Fontaine, one under Major Wylis, and another under Major Hall. And their plan is, if you can see on the map here, so their plan is they meet here and decide that Hardin and Hall will go to the southwest and wait here. And then Wylis and Fontaine will cross what was called the ford there on the Maumee River. And in, I guess you could say, kind of a pincer's movement, then Wylis and Fontaine would drive the Miami across the St. Joe into the waiting unit of Hardin and that. But as the best laid plans go, it didn't work. Hardin and Hall on their way around run into Native American, run into scouts, firing begins, and Kikianga instantly knows that they're under attack. So then Wylis decides to go ahead and ford the river, and under extremely heavy fire, he does get across, but loses a good number of men. So he gets across the Maumee and is met by us, and Shawnee were with us as well. And then Little Turtle goes back to that similar thing he had used before. And as you can see, this kind of shows, but so some of the Miami fled, if you will, staged almost like a fake retreat up this way. And once again, it worked. The militia fell for it and left Wylis and his 30 regulars right here, and they were quickly overrun. Wylis himself was killed. Those that did survive fled back across the St. Joe to join Hardin. Fontaine, died immediately. He staged a cavalry charge, and apparently his soldiers didn't like the idea, so he was the only one that charged. He was killed, obviously, and then those other 40 left the battlefield and went back to the camp 6 miles south of Fort Wayne. Major Hall then decided to cross here and join the remaining militia that was under a Major McCullen that left Wylis alone. When they went into Kikianga, there wasn't very much going on, so then they retreated as well and fell back to that same camp south of Fort Wayne, which left essentially Hardin. So he then was surrounded by, on 3 sides by Miami and Shawnee warriors, dug in expecting reinforcements to come from Harmer, which never came. And so after about 3 hours, he too retreated. back to that camp about 6 miles south of Fort Wayne. So when it was all said and done of that day, of the 500, 129 were dead and 94 were wounded. So you're not quite, but you're talking almost 50% of the attacking force was repelled and killed. And so again, and this really ended Harmer's whole campaign. After 2 days of losing that many people to a force that they, let's not be honest, underestimated dramatically, didn't expect to be able to out-strategize them like Little Turtle did, they fell back and left the area and went back to Fort Washington, which is Cincinnati. Well, the administration can't let that go, because again, the U.S. government needs the land to sell to pay for the war. So George Washington sends another unit, this time under a gentleman named St. Clair. Now, St. Clair was, a general in the Revolution as well. He was the governor of what they called the Northwest Territory at that time, which was the lands that weren't states yet, like Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, parts of Illinois. So he raised an army and left Fort Washington, which is basically present-day Cincinnati, to head towards Kikianga. That was the objective, was Kikianga, to destroy Kikianga and any native villages around it. So they leave in late October of 1791, heading for Kikianga. On November 3rd, they established camp on the Wabash River, and I wanted to show you this because it is present-day Fort Recovery, Ohio. So it just gives you an idea of how close it really is to where we are today. It's basically just right across like I said, where Fort Recovery, Ohio is today. So they camp on the banks of the Wabash. There, again, they seem to underestimate Little Turtle and our warriors. And so they send out one scouting unit who actually finds Native Americans, comes back and reports to his superior that he saw, Native Americans, Indians in the woods. And that superior decides, it's not that important, we won't worry about telling Sinclair. Well, in the meantime, approximately 1,400 Native Americans, which is about the size of Sinclair's force as well. So you're talking at these days, at this time, that's a pretty large army, especially of Native Americans, consisting of Shawnee, of course that's led by Chief Little Turtle. Shawnee were led by a war chief named Blue Jacket. And then the Lenape, who were also known as the Delaware, were led by a warrior named Buchanan. So they surrounded in a sort of a crescent shape, the 1,400 warriors surrounded and waited in the woods. And again, to me, this shows the sort of advanced sort of military discipline. Again, if you think about the ability to control 1,400 young men thirsty to fight, to sit still and quiet in the woods for several hours with their opponents basically within, little arm shot of them, is an impressive feat. So it goes to show that, Native American societies like ours, we're well disciplined, had structures like, military process and strategies and things of that nature. So they waited till dawn of the 4th to attack. So what they did was they came charging out of these woods, and the militia were stacking their weapons for breakfast. So completely unaware, drove almost all of the militia back into the main camp, and most of them unarmed. They left their weapons and they ran. Within 30 minutes, the Native American force had that whole area on the map completely surrounded, had the U.S. forces completely surrounded. And for the next 3 hours, Sinclair and his leadership tried to turn the tide by repeated bayonet charges. And again, showing Little Turtle's prowess, using a similar approach like the fleeing we saw in the second day of the Harmer defeat. They basically would give way like they're retreating as the bayonets came in, and then surround them and wipe them out. So finally, Sinclair and his men decide we're going to have to do one desperate bayonet charge, try and break through the line, and then flee to Fort Jefferson, which was 30 miles away. So they begin their bayonet charge, and it quickly just devolves into a rout. They just run. A lot of the officers, as they're trying to lead the bayonet charges, are wounded or killed, and so the followers of the camp, so that's something I'll point out, is back then, you used to have sort of what they call followers of the camp. You had wives of the soldiers that would come along. You had ladies of the evening for those single soldiers would come along, cooks, all those kinds of things. And basically they all ran. They dropped weapons, they dropped clothes. There's even reports of one woman dropping the baby she was carrying just so they could get away. So the native force gave chase for about 4 more miles before stopping pursuit. So that combined force under Little Turtle's direction basically gave the U.S. Army what is still one of its most decisive losses. And one of the reasons that is we'll look at the numbers in a minute, but again, for the standing U.S. Army at that time, we pretty much wiped it out in this one battle. There were 832 Americans killed, including almost 200, all 200 of those camp followers I mentioned, and there were 264 more that were wounded. So out of the 920 soldiers engaged, only 24 of them got out without a wound or being killed. This is clearly the worst defeat by a Native American force handed to it. And one of the things I would like to share this is because a lot of times we tend to think of Native Americans handing the U.S. Army a big defeat and we immediately go to the Battle of Little Bighorn, or the Greasy Grass as the Sioux call it. That was about 268, 270 men were killed that day. So this is clearly much worse than that. So again, it goes to show that Native Americans, especially us, the Miami and Little Turtle, weren't these crazy savages everybody always thinks or Hollywood always portrays. So those were basically the 3 successful defenses of our homeland. Eventually Anthony Wayne is sent, and after the Battle of Fallen Silvers in 1794, that is a force, by the way, that's not led by Little Turtle. It's more of a Native American confederation led by Blue Jacket of the Sioux. They're defeated at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, which is near present-day Maumee, Ohio, if you're familiar with Ohio. So then the Treaty of Greenville in 1795, basically, you can see, took most of Ohio, as well as a swath of Indiana. So it was signed on August 3rd in present-day Greenville, Ohio. It brought an end to the formal armed conflict, really, between our people and the U.S. Army, except for later on in the War of 1812, what's called the Battle of Mississinewa, which I would put forth was an unprovoked attack on a peaceful village that was neutral. But that's the only really other time we were ever in an engagement, if you will, against the then United States Army. So as you can see, what was taken from the Native Americans. What's also interesting about this treaty, if you will, is it started this whole process of paying annuities. So if you see almost in every treaty, Native Americans give up land, they're given things, and one of those is annuities of some kind, whether it's beads or goods or whatever, but it's payments of some kind, and that was started really with the Treaty of Greenville in 1795. Then from there, it's a little quiet on that front until the 1800s. When William Henry Harrison becomes the territorial governor of Indiana, the administration now under Thomas Jefferson still wants the land. The United States is expanding, they still want more land. Land at this age here in the United States is really sort of the aristocratic, it's the money, it's where you make your money. And so also it was a way I think Harrison wanted to try and establish himself a little bit. And so the first treaty is 1803 is Fort Wayne, and that one is just basically what's on this map is the Vincennes Tract, and this little spot down here called Clark's Grant. They were part of the Greenville Treaty, but they were never fully defined as far as where they stopped and started, the boundaries. So that's what the Treaty of Fort Wayne really did in 1803. Something to think about too, from the Native American standpoint, we lost most of Ohio, we start to lose these 2 tracts, and then the state next to us becomes a state also in 1803 as well. Then 1804, the Treaty of Vincennes. Here again you can see the southern tip of Indiana was taken from us through that. 1805, the Treaty of Grouseland, right in here. took this area and some more up here towards the south of Fort Wayne. The 1809 treaty, again of Fort Wayne, took these two large areas, which was, just to give you an idea, looking at this map, they don't look very big, but just these two areas was 29,709,530 acres, or 29 million, excuse me. So, so really it began a trend of starting to write treaties, starting to take lands from us. This is also part of what fuels Tecumseh, if you've heard of him, and his drive to unite the Native Americans, is the Shawnee were, a lot of them were in Ohio, so through the Battle of Greenville, they had been pushed continually out of Kentucky, now out of Ohio into Indiana, and now they're seeing Indiana, like we are, being taken away from the Native Americans as well. And then 1816, Indiana became a state, and I wanted to point this out because clearly we know the strategy or the path at this point, because Indiana becomes a state, and that's it. The rest of this is still our land. So clearly there was, there was never going to be, well, we'll stop here, thanks for your time, we'll be this little state of Indiana down here. Clearly the idea was they'll keep going. So then we have the St. Mary's Treaty of 1818, which removed the Delaware tribe from the state of Indiana. And as you can see, it took a very large swath of that center section of Indiana, including where we are right now. It also created what was called the Big Miami Reserve, so giving us basically this kind of northern area of the state as a reservation, if you will, a place for us to live now. Then the Treaty of Chicago, you can see, took more around the lakes. Then the two treaties of Mississinewa in 1826 and 1828 ceded a large part of that reservation, really almost cuts it in half. And that's also where we see where Chief Richardville specifically was also compensated. That's something we'll see in some of these other treaties. And there's significance to that coming up when I get to the 1840 treaty. And then of course, like I said, the Treaty of Chicago, the Treaty of Mississinewas, and then the Treaty of Tippecanoe in 1832. Right there, so you can see basically over the 1800s, there were just rapid treaty after treaty after treaty after treaty. And then we get to the Treaty of Wabash in 1840. And it was, as our, and I appreciate this, our Vice Chief, John Dunnigan, who's also the tribal historian who couldn't be with us tonight, I appreciate he's helped make sure these are on track, and he was the one that pointed out that it was actually written in 1838 and passed in 1840, that's the two dates. But basically the Treaty of the Wabash that you saw in the previous one is where, and I use the term agreed loosely, but where we as a people agreed in 5 years to move out to reservations of the same size, about 500,000 acres. We agreed to move out there to what is now in present day Kansas, across the Mississippi. And if you're familiar with your removal history a little bit, that was always the goal, was to keep moving Native Americans at that time across the Mississippi, because we didn't own any of that until the 1818s. And so the thought was they wanted everything on this side of the Mississippi, so we'll just keep pushing them out there to those lands we don't want. Now, some of the Chief Richardville, Chief Meshinga Mesa, Chief Francis Godfroy, and some other clans negotiated to remain here and were given tracts of land here. And so by doing that, the United States actually created, sort of split the tribe, if you will, from an administrative standpoint. They negotiated with the Miami Indians, which are the group we'll get into in a minute that will be removed, and then the Miami Nation of Indiana, which was Richardville and the families that stayed. And so this is a little bit of, from an administrative, I guess you could say, standpoint where we come into being from that regard. We've always been here, we've always been Miami, but in the government size, now there's two branches of us. Then the removal occurred itself in 1846. Essentially, per the Treaty of the Wabash in 1840, the Miami Indians were forced to move. About 500 of them total were rounded up by the military, by bounty hunters, contractors, whatever you want to call them, loaded up onto canal boats October 6th in present-day Peru, Indiana, and were removed to Kansas. Eventually then, again, if you know your history, Once we got across the Mississippi, we decided we wanted that stuff too, so they would eventually again be moved, that group, from Kansas to present day where they are now, Oklahoma. And so that's where the Miami tribe of Oklahoma is today. Then June 5th of 1854, there were more treaties. That treaty was important because it recognized the Miami of Indiana, referred to us as the Eastern Band of the Miami, as a separate tribal government from the Western Band, and allowed us to negotiate on our own, essentially, as well as determine our own tribal membership. So again, this is important in that essentially we're federally recognized once again as a separate tribe, separate government, all those kinds of things. And then there were several treaties after that, but some of the more important ones were the 1854, 1889, and 1895. A lot of them just kind of defined tracts of land, paid out annuities and payrolls, things that were supposed to be paid. But that is part of where we draw when someone wants to join the tribe. They have to trace their ancestry back to one of those three payrolls. And so that's how we establish being able to know if they're Miami of Indiana, is by their ability to trace their family lineage back to them. Then in 1897, an attorney by the name of Willis Van Devanter, who was from Marian, Indiana, while serving as the Assistant Attorney General, was asked to give a legal opinion. So at this time, remember, the state of Indiana is here. We still have reservations here. And a federally recognized tribe is almost like Vatican City, if you're familiar with that. We're a separate entity. We're not controlled by the United States, therefore we don't pay state taxes on our lands, those kinds of things. And the state obviously doesn't like that. So Van Devanter is asked to give an opinion on if the state could charge property taxes towards our reservations. He took it as an opportunity to put a decision, or a ruling, if you will, his thought process into why we're not even a tribe anymore. Opinion, thank you. Yeah, thank you, I was looking for the word, thank you. It's his opinion. And so what ends up happening is he writes this opinion, the state of Indiana uses that opinion to justify that, see, they're not even a tribe, they're Indiana citizens, and therefore they need to pay property tax. And so then they begin to charge the Miami tribe property taxes for the lands. Now culturally, that's, number one, that's illegal, which we'll get into in a minute. But also, from a culture standpoint, it's a very foreign concept. We as Miami, we had sort of an area we controlled, but it wasn't like I own a plot and Chief Buchanan owns a plot. We all just work in this territory together, hunting and growing, and we work together. And if you need something and I have it, I'll help give you that. And so the American society, or Indiana, starts to apply a very sort of Anglo concept of you own this land, therefore you pay taxes on this land. And so essentially what begins to happen is they then just accumulate property tax debt against us and then use that as the reason to begin to seize what are our reservation lands, to sell them off for the property taxes. Now the reason why that opinion, the way that was handled by the state, is illegal is because Congress is the only one that can remove federal recognition. Congress is the only one that can negotiate treaties with foreign nations, and that's a similar concept here. So that's why the whole process was illegal as far as that was done. Then there's the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. Before that, there was the Native American Citizenship Act of 1924, where essentially it really made us wards of the government. So at this point, we've lost our lands, Now the 1934 Reorganization Act, one of the things that stopped, and like I said, I could keep you here for hours, but one of the things that happened were tribal lands, and not just for us, but for others, had begun to be allocated into individual lots for tribe members, almost giving them pieces of the land. So the tribe didn't own it, the individual owned it. And that was a tactic that was stopped through that 1934 Act. It also decreased federal government in their control of Indian affairs and gave Native Americans the ability to self-govern more. And so that's under that auspices, then we formed the Miami Nation of Indians of Indiana, which is technically a 501c3, on September 30th of 1937. And now I will hand it over to my colleague.
Good job. Thank you.
So I'm going to apologize before I even get started because I get a little passionate when we start talking about federal recognition, and hopefully you all see why. The tribe has been put through so much humiliation within the state, the federal government, that it just ticks me off. And when I see my generation trying to make the right or wrong, they can make it right, and all of my elders are gone, it's very hurtful to know that I hope somebody in the next generation can carry on if we have to continue this ridiculous fight. So we're going to talk about federal recognition right now. The tribe filed a petition for tribal recognition back in the late 1980s and early 1990s. That petition was 7 criteria. Out of that 7 criteria, we were denied under 2 of them. The department found that the nation had failed to prove 2 mandatory criteria, which was insufficient community and political authority. Now, it's not that we didn't have the evidence, it's we didn't have a sufficient amount of evidence in their opinion. And those were during the periods of 1940 to 1970. Lo and behold, where were the men? Fighting in World War II and fighting in Vietnam. So they weren't around. Women held it down. We didn't have meetings every month. They didn't get together every month because the men were across the seas fighting. But in their opinion, they denied us under those 2 criteria. Now you'll notice the dates are kind of slipping back and forth and here and there. I just want to show everybody that when one thing's going on over here, we got something going on over here. We're trying to fight it from every possible angle that we can come to. Just because I got put all my fish in one basket, that means I'm going to just stick with that. Because if I see something else going over here in the back door, I'm going to go for it. Because if I can get it that way, and instead of waiting on some of this stuff, it's worth it. It's worth a try to attack from all angles, kind of like what Little Turtle did, right? So in 2000, we had Congressman Souter from Fort Wayne introduce a House resolution bill, dead in the water, didn't go nowhere, didn't go to committee. In 2002, that was the appeal that we had from our federal recognition process and the denial that they had in that petition. So in 2002, we got an appeal, and it was heard in the 7th Circuit Court in Chicago, Illinois. Judge Posner was the one presiding over that. And Judge Posner agreed the Van Devanter decision, opinion, as I corrected Keith on, was something that was out of his jurisdiction. He couldn't do nothing about that, nor did he care. He wasn't even going to take any consideration for it. But what he was saying in that decision, if you look it up, that we provided tribal abandonment. So how could he grant recognition to a tribe when we abandoned ourselves? Totally made no sense. Well, that's exactly what he did. So the appeal was dead in the water. That was the end of it. And the only way we can get tribal recognition now is go through the congressional side of things, because we've been through the judicial side, we've been through the administrative side with the petition. Congressional is all we can do at this point in time in 2002. In 2003, Congressman Mark Souter tried it again, put out another House Bill Resolution 954, and it was dead in the water, dead on arrival. Didn't go nowhere. In 2003 and 4, Governor O'Bannon promoted the Native American Commission. He was a great man. I'm going to tell you that right now. I got to know Governor O'Bannon very well. And he told me something I'll never forget. And he said that the Indiana Miami was Indiana's best kept secret. And that's exactly true. Well, when the commission bill went to him for review for the final signing, he vetoed it. Couldn't understand why. When you look at the gist of the subject matter of the bill itself, the Indians that had a right to sit on that commission had to be satisfied under the definition of a federally recognized Indian in U.S. Code 25 of the federal government. Federal recognized Indian. That did not include Indiana Miami people. So he vetoed it, and it went dead. In 2004, it was an interesting thing. So while this is going on here in stateside, Vice Chief John and myself took a trip to Geneva, Switzerland. We want to go to Switzerland because we want to go to the World Court. We want to go to the World Platform and read a statement for the tribe about how our government has treated us and is continuing to treat us for this federal recognition issue. So Vice Chief John and I and this attorney Bill Bradford here at IEPUI, I don't think he works there anymore, we all went to Geneva and we're up in the Warwick Hotel and we're writing out the statement the day before I had to present it. And we go into this, if you ever watch C-SPAN, you know, the caucus rooms they've got, it's kind of what it was like. And I got this little switch and I'm switching on and I read the statement of how we've been mistreated by our own government. Now mind you, there are all kinds of countries there because the name of that commission that we went to was on human rights. It was for indigenous peoples and conflict resolution. So there's a lot of people there that's upset with their own countries. But these are things that are happening where starvation, you know, things that are really, really serious. I kind of felt out of place because, you know, I know all, you know, we got some down and out folks that in tribe, but nobody's starving. And there's some really serious stuff going on here on the World Platform. But as soon as I turned that off and finished our statement, we got swamped by about 50 or 60 country delegates come up to want a copy of our statement. And I couldn't believe it. I was kind of shocked and I was almost ashamed after hearing some of the other problems that these other countries have. I looked over at John and I said, man, do you feel that? It was like all of our ancestors that we've ever had come down and just hug us. They just put their arms around us and just gave us a hug. It was a feeling of, wow, we've done something that the afterlife is paying attention to. What an awesome feeling. And I asked some of the people there at the Geneva Convention, I said, how come all these people want a copy of our, when there's so many things going on out there in this world, how come they want ours? She said, well, everybody talks about the United States and how wonderful it is. It is a beautiful country, if you ever go to anybody else's. But one thing you never see is an American that's upset with the American government. You don't hear that. And that's why they wanted a copy of it. I thought, well, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. But I'm still kind of embarrassed because of all the other things. Now, what we learned in Geneva was that we now know how to go to the World Platform, the World Court, through Costa Rica, and file a lawsuit against the United States of America. Now, why we haven't done it, this was back, like I said, in 2004, is that costs a lot of money. And as you heard Keith say, we're a 501c3 not-for-profit. It's not happening unless we get some serious money backers. And I mean a lot of money. So that's always an option for us because we do know how to do it now. It's just educating ourselves on how to make it better someday if we have to. And I hope to God we don't. This next slide's about federal and state recognition, which is going to shock you guys. You probably don't know nothing about it, but it always happens in the wayside. 2005 through 2008, Governor Daniels appointed myself as the chairman for the Native American Commission. He did that because that law I told you about that Buchanan vetoed, they ended up passing it. But you had, in order to have a seat on the Native American Commission to this day, you have to be a federally recognized Indian. And that was the same as what it was in 2005. Governor Daniels appointed me under that definition as a federally recognized Indian. One, I'm not in their eyes, but I'm now the chairman of the commission. There's three ways you can get recognition. That's administrative, judicial, and congressional. Well, to me, that's administrative acknowledgement of state recognition because he put me on the chair position during that time. As I've sitting in that position, I testified in the Department of Ways and Means downtown and got $200,000 appropriated to our commission. And I had a great group of people we worked with and even some of the offices that were represented there. And it was pretty awesome because that $200,000 we had just had it going to teach the school kids in grade school Indiana history the correct way through satellite communications. What an awesome program to get started. Governor Daniels and his administration did not support us on that. In fact, they were ticked off at me for going to the Ways and Means and asking for that money without his approval. They wanted us to follow his guideline, what his ideas were. They didn't want us to make anything good for our community. And to me, a commission for Native Americans should be like the Latinos and the Women's Commission. You should be working for the community and the cause that you're working for, and the name of that committee is. But that wasn't the case in this situation. Because of that, myself and the executive committee made up of all Native Americans to through all different parts of the area in the state, we all resigned because they just wouldn't support us. And that $200,000, where do you think that went? It went back to general fund and made Governor Daniels look good. They didn't spend it on satellite teaching for the kids. It didn't happen. If you read in the paper during that time frame, they'll tell you in the paper, I ain't got clippings that says that Native Americans resigned because we didn't get computers. That's a bold-faced lie. That was not the reason. They just wouldn't support us on it. We didn't follow his game plan. Here's another good one for you. So it went dead. We resigned. 2008. 2014, it stayed stagnant that whole time. 2014, Governor Pence, lo and behold, appointed another Miami person, Aaron Oliver, which is John Dunnigan's daughter. And Aaron took a seat for 4 years under the same definition of a federally recognized Indian in the U.S. Code 25. Now, Aaron's an attorney got her degree at Notre Dame and then went to Michigan State to get her graduate degree. She's awesome. She's smart. So she served on that commission for 4 years at the appointment from Governor Pence. Well, they put a bill attached to another bill, which is how they do things here in the state. If they want something passed and they know it's not going to be very popular, they'll slide it with another bill and attach it to it when they know that other bill's going to pass. And it did. And that removed her. So Pence put her on, and they removed her with legislation. And now, to this day, the Native American Commission has absolutely no Miami of Indiana representation on it. Not very happy with it. But both of us, myself and Aaron, had been previously put on there under that federal recognition definition. Now, is that the most crookedest thing you ever see going on here in our state? While this is all going on in 2012, Senator Randy Head, state senator up in our area, up north, he did 2 bills, okay? Simultaneously, or not simultaneously, 1 year after the other. And each bill was to give us state recognition. Now, Indiana doesn't have a state recognition process. And that's just because there's not one written. And when I took the seat for the commission, I wasn't allowed to study the recognition process because they told me they weren't going to let me do it. So we went ahead and did it, tried to do it through the congressional side of things. Both bills that Senator Head put out there went to the Public Policy Committee, both years. Well, the first year it went dead, didn't get a hearing. Second year went dead, but before they closed it out and shoved it under the table, I said to the council, let's go take a trip to Indianapolis and let's find out when the next Public Policy Committee meeting is going to be. So we did. We showed up at Chairman Ron Alting's chambers right before his committee meeting and demanded why he hasn't given us a hearing for the last 2 years, because it's been there. Why haven't you done it? And he literally pushed us out of his chambers out into the hallway at the State House. And lo and behold, right around my corner was Senator Head. And I sat back and realized, oh my gosh, I don't want to be a politician, because that gentleman literally threw Senator Head under the bus. He said, well, your senator didn't demand it, he didn't request it, there was no inquisition to have this done. He just didn't. So that's why we didn't give you a hearing. I said, for 2 years? And that was the end of that, so it went dead. 2012 and 13, at the same time, President Obama established a new federal recognition task force to review and revise the federal petition process, those 7 criteria I told you about. In 2013, a draft was made with the new standards. Now, this was going to be a policy change. It doesn't have to go through Congress. It just is a policy. It gets reviewed. There's got to be hearings across the state. And then after all the hearings are done, then it goes to the president's desk for review. And then it becomes policy. It gets enacted. It's that simple. So they went ahead and put some new standards out there. And guess what? Out of that 7 criteria, 2 of them were thrown out because they were determined unjust and not fair. And guess what ones they were? They were the 2 criteria that denied us under the first petition. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So now we're going, oh my goodness. So the 2 criteria we got denied under are no longer part of the process. That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Out of that draft, knowing that issue, there were 2,800 general comments. About 300 of them were tribally related to federal recognition. In 2014 and 15, they had community hearings all across the United States of America. The one from my area, our area, the tribes area, was in Petoskey, Michigan. Vice Chief John and I went up there and we met friends from all different Native American tribes that had the same problems similar to ours. Went up there to testify on behalf of support for this new policy change. And the reason for that being is in 2015, the provision was added to that policy saying that tribes that were previously denied under the old petition process would have the right to re-petition under the new policy. Why wouldn't you support that? That's fantastic. That's exactly what we've been waiting on, you know? So that's what we did. We went and did that. But then it goes through all of the reviews, it goes through all of the things that we went through before. It's, you know, all these different community outlooks and comments. It goes to Obama for review and he took it out. He took out the provision. Well, one can speculate. We know why he took out the provision, but I'm not going to mention it today. If you want to catch me after meeting, I'll be glad to give you my opinions, because I know what happened on the Hill. But he took that provision out. Guess what? Now we don't have the right to re-petition, so why the heck would I support it? Why would a tribe support it? So during that time frame, after we found out Obama did that to us, 2017, we made friends with Senator Donnelly. And he sponsored a bill along with co-sponsor Senator Young. He's a new senator, junior senator at that time. This is the 115th Congress, 2017-2018. And he introduced a bill that would give us the right to re-petition under the new policy, regardless of what Obama did. It went to the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, and it died. They did not give it a hearing. No, they wouldn't even talk to anybody about it. In 2020, Senator Young now is the senior senator, and he stayed on board with us. He's still supporting us. Senator Young and Senator Braun, he co-sponsored it, and they went ahead and decided to do another legislation, which is the same as the one that was done in 2017. And this Congress, 116th Congress, sent it to the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, and it just sat there and rotted. Well, I had some council members that was ticked, which I totally agree. We decided to have a phone campaign and flood their office with phone calls. It's exactly what we did. They got mad. They got real mad. But they didn't give us a hearing, and it died. During this time, this is all going on, you got two tribes out there, the Chinook tribe and the Burt Lake tribe of Ottawa and Chippewa tribes. Now, the Burt Lake, we'd met up in Petoskey when I said we went up to do the testimony in support of that new policy change. They filed a lawsuit against the administration and the Department of Interior. And they said that it was totally wrong, that they took that provision out. And guess what? It was done in the Supreme Court, that the criteria was removed, and they ruled that it was capricious and arbitrary. And they won. Both of them did. Not just one tribe. Burt Lake won first, I believe. I don't remember which one won first, but they were right after one another. So we thought, well, this is pretty cool. So both of that Supreme Court rulings went to the Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they had 60 days to appeal it. Well, we thought for sure they were going to appeal it, but they did not appeal it. Unusual, isn't it? In January 2022, this year, our senators Young and Braun, back on our side again, found out that the Burt Lake and Chinook had done this, filed their Supreme Court lawsuits and won. They decided to write letters of support for us, just to show you how politics works. We all know this. We got a lot of friends right now in Washington on the Hill. And Young and Braun sent these support letters to the Department of Interior. Deb Holland's over that, she's a Native lady. Brian Newland's in Bureau of Indian Affairs, Native man. We just checked to see how well received did Senator Braun and Senator Young's letters of support go. So our attorney called some people that we know up there, and they said, well, we didn't get any. Orlando Locklear, who's our attorney, said, well, they sent them, because I know for a fact, because I got the return that they got them. No, they didn't get them. Orlando goes, well, I got them on my email. I'll just hand deliver them to both offices. So she did. She went and delivered them to each one of those people. Somebody was intercepting their mail. Somebody was doing something with them letters of support. But it didn't really matter. They didn't really do anything with it. It went clear to July the 6th of I was Burt Lake and Chinook, I'd be real mad right now because they got a Supreme Court ruling saying they need to enact this. It's now July the 6th. It's a deadline. If a tribe or anybody who's interested party has a right to put a comment in there, they could. And what we did. Susan Greenbaum was a lady that did our studies for us during our federal recognition years back in the 80s. Jack Campisi also did. He put a comment in there, giving, asking the Indiana Miami for support, and along with the tribe and myself and our attorneys, and even I think Stuart Rayford did, Sean. We had a lot of comments in there supporting us to try to do this. Now that was deadline on July the 6th, 2022. In August of 2022, Senator Young, Senator Braun, God bless them both, put another bill out there that went to the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs and it died. And I will tell you, to this day, the last thing I got was about 2 weeks ago, was that we're going to hear something, and it's usually they're going to make a statement next week. And since July. And 2 weeks ago, and I tell you, I'm ticked off about it. So 2 weeks ago, I hear this, oh, when the election becomes final, then we're going to hear something. Well, I don't know, is there any states out there still counting? I don't know if there are or not, but, you know, what are we waiting on? It's going to be February next year before they do anything. How long can a tribe go? And I'm not an attorney and I don't know the answers to these things, but how long can it go? I mean, ignoring the 2 tribes that filed the lawsuit and won. Now, what did we learn from all this? Well, they got to address those 2 tribes. That's a judicial Supreme Court ruling. So what we're going to do is, if they don't add us and take care of us through just regular policy, we're going to follow the same route that those 2 tribes did, because they've already set precedents. And let us deny us on that. It wouldn't surprise me if they did, but I don't see how they could when you know how these lawsuits go. When you got somebody who set a precedent, it's hard to go against it. But look what's happened in the last 30 years. It kind of doesn't surprise me one bit. So as of today, I have no update whatsoever. All I ask is if you want to support us, get a hold of our senators and let them know. Because I don't think you calling if Washington or anybody else in the Bureau or Department of Interior will make any good right now. It's all at the top levels at the president right now. And like I said, I can tell you what goes on out of these 4 walls, but right now, you know, it's rumor. So what I have heard is not something that we need to be publishing and get thrown out there because I don't really know. It's just what I've heard, and it doesn't surprise me. So right now, I'd like to take a little bit of a break and then have some of the ladies and gents come out and do a Miami honor song. This gives the honor to these Miami people that have come up here from Peru, Fort Wayne, and where else? Peru, Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, Rockville, coming from all directions. The second song is called Tapalot. Well, that's bright lights. Tapalot means love. It's a base word for love. Is anybody here with their husbands? Can you turn the house lights on real quick? Anybody here is with their husbands and wives? Oh, there you're right there. I'm busted. Look at each other and say, Tapali Liliani. It means I love you. Oh, I recognize another one back here. Tapali Liliani. Look at him and say, Tapali. Maybe your son, but you go ahead and tell him. Sorry, I put you on the spot. Apologize. So that's what Tapalot means. It's the love of everything. It's a base word. So we talk about the love of the mountains, the valleys, and the rivers, and Marian University. So again, if you want to come up and dance with these guys, I'm sure they'd enjoy it. Take it away, guys. Miss Rachel, we're running into lateness here, so I'm going to go through here pretty quick. So thank you, youngins. We're going to run through this about as quick as possible because I know that we were only supposed to keep this to, what, an hour? There's a lot here. Miami Nation of today. Most important things we got going on right now is to promote our assets that we have. In these pictures, what we've got is whoops, I went backwards. Where you go? Where's it at? We got our drums, the most important thing, that's our grandmother. There's guys down there drumming too. This is a totem pole that the People's Medicine Drum gifted the tribe. This is this Cherokee star up on top. Their Cherokee history proves that Marian and Cherokee did not get along, and now we're best of friends. This is a shame doing the smudging out there at the gathering, which some of you was able to join us this last June. We sure appreciated you coming out. And there's a round dance we have a lot of fun with. Tribal government. There's a main governing body consisting of 4 executive offices: the chief, vice chief, treasurer, and secretary. And the council consists of 15 seats. And they all have representation of 5 grandfather family clans. And they have 4 at-large seats. Can you turn up the house lights real quick again? Thank you. So as I mentioned your name, please stand up. I want to recognize my council who are able to make it. Our pipe carrier is Sean Dunnigan, a council member. Thank you, Sean. Carl Lavancher back here in the red. He's been on council forever. Janelle Hart. Janelle is not quite on council yet, but she's going to be taking her mother, Marilyn Rumsey's position, and Marilyn's been on council forever. And I'm saying 35, 40 years probably, close to it. And then we have Florence Tigler. Florence, thank you. Anybody else I'm forgetting out there? Okay, then we got some back. Oh, and then we got our treasurer, Mr. Shane Fox, and lead singer. And it's this lady right here behind us, is Sarah Beitzel. Get it right this time. Sarah. And that's Sarah right there giving the council, her council reports. And that's our council room up in Peru. These guys are the greatest bunch of people I've ever worked with. Back in the day when we had council meetings on a river at one of the lodges, they used to go inside and talk a while, go out and fight. Now we actually talk a while and talk long, and then we talk more, and don't let Carl talk because he talks too much. I'm sorry, I had to throw that out. Carl did a great job when the bus came up. Remember, he did a great job of coming in and helping out. So thanks a lot, council members, appreciate it. The vice chief and the chief are elected positions by the tribe. Gosh, it's been like, I don't know, five or six. I've been chief since 2002.
Since 1998.
So I've been on council as secretary in 98, but it's been uncontested for the last 4 or 5 elections, and I don't know if there's just nobody stupid enough to run for office. Is that the case?
Yep.
So, yep. And I got a promise to my dad, so I ain't gonna quit until y'all throw me out, so there you go. The vice chief and chief are elected. The secretary and treasurer are elected by council the month after the elections. And Sarah's been secretary for like 20 years too, so it's all working good for you, isn't it? We have several subcommittees that report to council. We'll go through that here in a second. Miami Nation today. This is our tribal complex, the Peru complex. This is the old Peru High School. We purchased it. Ray White did, actually. It's on the National Historical Registry right now. Around 1989 is when we got that building. It's one of the first tribal properties owned by the tribe since federal recognition was removed. Programs and events. Right up here is our bingo hall. Right here is our food bank. It's one of the best top 4 food banks right now, I think, in Indiana. Right here is our Crane's Nest, which is the first tribally owned gift shop in the state. This is all located in the tribal complex in Peru. Then we have a museum, which I don't have a slide for. We got a lot of stuff in there right now, and the reason why it's not up there is because we haven't had a grand opening yet, so it's not formally open. We'll let you go up there and look through it if you want, but it's not ready to open to the public yet. We need more funds to make it look nicer. Then every year, you see with the removal, October 6, 1946. Well, every year we have a removal memorial march in October, as close to the date as possible. It's usually not on the 6th. And that's what this is. They take wreaths, the Women's Council take these wreaths that they made for everybody who was removed, and they walk over to the bridge there in Peru, and they float them down the river out west of Kansas, which is pretty awesome. We have ceremony, pipe ceremony, and prayer, and the drum, and then we all go back to the council. Programs and events. Streeper's Nightmare still goes on. It's we have two young men that run that. It's a haunted house. They also have escape rooms throughout the year. It's pretty cool. Been through all of them. They like to doctor them up when I go through, which is not fair, but they do that, and they have a lot of fun. They make a significant donation back to the tribe. I think this year it's $15,000 just for this last month. It's been an awesome donation. We have emergency shelter down in the basement of the tribal complex. Originally it was called the Battered Women's Shelter, but it's used for all kinds of families who are down and out. What we don't want is somebody out there sleeping on the streets. So there's a little apartment downstairs that we keep, and if somebody gets down and out and needs help, they get a hold of us and we put them up for as long as possible. We don't want you staying there a month, 2 months. We want to get you back on your feet and get you out there to the public and get you, recuperating. So, but that room's available for people who are down and out. Little Turtle Daycare, we don't do it anymore, but that's what this is up here, these 2 rooms. We did it for over a decade. State rules now with daycares is pretty bad, so we decided to get out of that. We have AA, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. We have drug awareness meetings. We got a family reunion, which is this one right here. We get everybody there at the Wabash City Park, put the drum out, eat, and have a good time. It's a big old family reunion. We have scholarship fund. We give $500 scholarships to all of our youngins. Well, not all of them. 2 per year. It's all we can afford. We have language camps every year. This one's up at the Dunes State Park. It was a couple of years ago. There's Sarah right there. And Aaron Oliver, that's his attorney that I was telling you about. Sean's sister. And we have Longhouse. You all met Sean when you came up with the students. This is our Longhouse. I think that's Sean right there. Some of you students, if you're here tonight, you might have your picture up here because that's where it came from when y'all came out. So, same 7 pillars. We have a ceremony called Mother Moon, which I can't tell you nothing about because I'm not female. So that's something you'll have to ask Sarah. And we have a Miami maiden appointment. That happens every year. It's like Miss America of the tribe. Right there we've got Sean Fox and Savannah Mongosa. Where are they at? Get out here, you ladies. Are they out here? Are they sleeping? Yeah, I'm just going to bring out Layman here in a second. These 2 ladies, come up here where people can see. Savannah and Shauna, come up here. These 2 ladies are past Miami maidens, and now a Miami maiden is picked by, they are the peers. They are the ones that's choosing the new maidens. It used to be the Elder Women's Council did it, but these ladies now are part of the group that will pick the new maidens. Because of COVID, we've had somebody hold that honor for the last 3 years. And that lady is right here, Miss Elena Marks. So give it up for these beautiful ladies. And smile. You got beautiful smiles. We do parades, 3 Rivers, Peru, Carmel. We've been to Carmel a couple times. I can tell you one little instance real quick. We was at Carmel in drumming, and the guy took off too fast. And Aaron, do you remember that? God, I was so embarrassed. Aaron was standing behind me dancing on the float, and we were drumming. He took off, and we were sitting on logs. And I fell back, and she was standing like this. Right between her feet, looking up. Thank God she had something on underneath it. But who do you think was on the side of the road taking pictures? Channel 8 News. That's my luck. But we have a great time at the parades. And then we've got all the council members who've been there and done that. We go to all kinds of speaking presentations to raise cultural awareness in schools. We've gone to scouting groups, clubs, Masonic lodges, historical organizations, Marian University. Woo! We have other tribal properties. You all know about the pillars. It's a national formation carved out in the limestone banks of the Sinawah River. It's a sacred place to be used for meetings, and at one time was a trading post. This is where we have our Days of the Pillars event. It's also good for the kids to go out there and play in the river. Have a lot of fun out there. We own 37 acres right across from those pillars. Now there's the Knopf and Tigler family, which you met Florence, and some of these youngins up here dancing were part of the Tigler family, and that's their Wikiamis up there that they built. They have a whole slew of them. We got 3 or 4 of them now, right? And they come at the pillars, wherever events that they can possibly make it, and show everybody what the culture was like and the housing was back in the day. We have a 150-acre powwow, which Marian University came out and joined us on this last year in June. There was it was farmland, 150 acres. A dude named Stan Calvert, who was a family friend. He's a friend of my brother's, and my mom and dad's known him for 50-some years or plus. He said he'd done something. He's never done anything in life that's made him proud. He's been a shrewd businessman and very hateful, and he wanted to do something before he died. And that was, he asked me, he said, how many times have you known a white man to give Indian land back? I said, I don't think I've ever heard of it. He goes, well, you have now, and he gives 150 acres. So that's what, we got big plans for that property, and hopefully someday we can do some really nice stuff out there. Right now we have the gathering, but I'd like to have showers and all kinds of cool stuff out there, and housing, and maybe some Wikiamis or something. Who knows what we can do? It's unlimited, so that's something we'd like to promote in the future. Y'all know about this, I already told you. So I'm trying to get through this. We own all of our ancestral cemeteries. There's 4 of them. Francis, Slocum, Godfrey, Clayton, Meshinga Mesa. Meshinga Mesa Schoolhouse is located on the Meshinga Mesa Cemetery ground. Right there is the schoolhouse. Right there is what the schoolhouse used to look like. It's a corn crib. Then the farmer gave it back to us. We restored it. Now it looks like that. And that's what it looks like inside. And so the original chalkboard and flooring. And so all this is now open to the public. If you want to go, you got to get a hold of the Tribal Complex office, and we'll take you out there. Again, if we had more staffing, we'd love to have people go out there and teach classes. But this schoolhouse was made for the kids by Meshinga Mesa, built in the 1860s by Chief. It was on his reservation. I told you about where it came from. That we restored it. Kind of going through this, folks, because we're running over time. This is the last slide. Challenges we face today. We want to continue to fight to regain federal recognition as the #1 priority. As you can see, what I told you about, there's a lot of dirt going on in this world, in the federal government, and even at the state side. Politics is nasty. I'm not a politician. So we may go on until somebody else takes leadership and figure out a way to get in. But we could use all the help you can get to voice your opinions and help us out getting the word out. We're tired of people saying, oh, is it Republican or is it Democrat? Is it Democrat or Republican? Are you independent? Who cares? When was the world coming to where we say, what's the morally right thing to do? That's the question to be answered. That's what we need to do. What does that federal recognition do for me? Not a whole heck of a lot. As far as monetary, it don't do nothing for me. It might do something for grandkids. They might get some scholarship availabilities, or they might have some help with some of the housing in colleges. You never know what the federal funds can open up for us, but as Brian Buchanan, I'm not getting anything out of it. What it does for me is a restoration of dignity. It's for me to look up and say to my father, hey, we did it. We finally put you at peace to know that you are a federally recognized man, even though he already knows that. But that's what we're fighting for. And I've told my brother several times, hey, I'm done. He goes, no, you can't do that. So he won. So that's kind of where we're at with the federal recognition. We're not going to give up on it. We'll make citizens of Indiana and the United States aware of what we do. You see, it says we were made here, stayed here, and still here. Well, that's what it says on our truck when we go to the parades. And we won't be able to stay afloat. 501c3, it's pretty tough when you have a bingo hall, and that's the only source of income. We want to keep providing for the community. We want to continue raising funds to fix things like this. This is what's going on right now. We're actually getting these fixed. These are pilsters that are located on the building that are just literally crumbling down. Somebody get hit with one of those, they're going to die. But they're getting fixed right now. Thank God for donations that's coming in. You can see some of the window damage. So that's basically what we've got going on. We're going to close with closing prayer, and I want to invite everybody to come up here and stand around the drum